Yeah, and let's dispel I'm just going to call it bullshit narrative that's going around about the talent level of Iowa football. I mean, listen, there's always going to be this stigma attached to Iowa football that, they're just some good old country boys that were developed and went from 2 stars into guys who could potentially be NFL players. But across the board, they'll never be as talented as an Ohio State or an Alabama or a Georgia. Well, okay, look at this. Look at the depth chart for Iowa on just the defensive side of the ball. Jack Campbell, you don't find Jack Campbell sitting anywhere. That's an NFL player with NFL type pedigree and just a build and athleticism. You could put him on Alabama right now on their starting lineup, and he would not skip a beat. He would fit right in. He would actually probably stand out on this Alabama defense at linebacker. You look at Justin Jacobs, same thing. Again, super talented guy, incredible athlete, somebody that you're not going to find on most college football teams year in and year out. Then you look towards the back end, and guys like Matt Hankins could start on a lot of these top 10 teams in college football, and Dane Belton could have a role on a lot of these teams that are in the top 10 in college football right now, and Zach Van Valkenburg looks like a pass-rushing monster. And then that's just the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, there's a lot of gaps they can fill in, and they're getting better across the board there. But Tyler Linderbaum, one of the best, probably the best offensive lineman in the nation right now, or at least up there in the top 3. And Sam Laporta, as good as tight end you're going to find. Tyler Goodson is one of the best running backs in terms of just intelligence, patience, and ability to make people miss just with quickness in a box. And across the board, they probably have the most cohesive offensive line you're ever going to find. And they haven't even been playing with Kyler Schott at full strength. So this narrative, and I'm going to, David Pollack is one of those guys on ESPN that keeps pushing it that, oh, what happens if Iowa plays Ohio State? What happened when Iowa, with a lesser team, played Ohio State back in, 2017 and beat them 55-24? This Iowa team is tenfold better than Ohio State, this Iowa team right now is tenfold better than that Iowa team of that year. And Ohio State this year, have you watched Ohio State this year? They're not running around with a lot of dogs. They have good receivers and a couple good players here and there on the defense. But across the board, Iowa is by far a better team right now.
Ohio State, if given the opportunity, would just swap defenses if they could. And
yes.
I'm not just talking about like the scheme or what, like they would just take those guys and say, look, the way Iowa is playing them, those guys right now are better than what Ohio State has on their team right now. So this idea of, like you said, they have great receivers. I think they have 2 really good running backs. Their quarterback is fine. But if you put those 2 teams in the trenches, and I like a couple of Ohio State's offensive linemen, but if you put those 2 teams in the trenches, there's no question which team is the more physically dominant team on both sides right now. And the way this defensive line is playing up to this point, they haven't faced a great offensive line yet. But we've said it, like there are just so few great offensive lines in all of college football. But you know what this is? This is a great defensive line. And the way they play, the way they can shuffle 7, 8 guys and not miss a beat, you don't notice when they're rotating. It's not one of those things, it's like, oh, so-and-so's out, like that makes a big difference. No, it doesn't. And you look at the way the snaps have been split and how even they are and how those guys are staying fresh, and they're so interchangeable. It's absolutely mind-blowing how strong the defensive line has been after just losing 3 NFL defensive linemen and an NFL linebacker. Like what they've done on defense is absolutely astonishing. And it's with great players who are very well coached and who play so hard and are constantly surrounding the ball. And they take swarm to just like the truest of level. That's like the motto of Iowa football. Everything is posted swarm. That's what this defense is. And it's not, they swarm the ball, they swarm together. It was so cool in that Maryland game. Like anytime the defense would make a big play, they'd get to the sideline. There's offensive players like jumping around with them. And we'd see the same thing. When the offense would make a play, they'd get to the sideline and the defensive players were jumping around with them. Like that team is so together in every sense. It's just so fun to watch right now.
Yeah, you said it. You know, the only player I think if you took away from the defensive line that there would be a noticeable hurdle, I suppose, Zach Van Valkenburg, just because there's a speed rush element with him that you can't replace. So if you need a third down rush or a team is running these long developing plays like we're going to see from Penn State this weekend, you need a guy who can generate pressure and win a one-on-one. And Zach Van Valkenburg looks like probably the only guy who can consistently do that from a pass rushing standpoint. Because, I mean, you know, interior guys like Logan Lee, Lucas Van Ness, and Noah Shannon have that explosiveness and can generate pass rushes. But as far as just opportunity to do that and the way that Iowa game plans on the inside there, they're not going to get as many opportunities as a Zach Van Valkenburg would. So that would be probably the one player, if you took it away from, honestly, this entire defense, that there might be that little hiccup or hurdle that you need to overcome. But even so, the defense without Zach Van Valkenburg would still be pretty much where it's at. I mean, this is a special group. And 7 turnovers against Maryland and Talia Tagovailoa, who is the best quarterback Iowa's faced so far. I mean, legitimately, it's not, and that's not shade thrown at Iowa State. I don't really care about them at this point anymore. Brock Purdy's just not it. He's not on that same level as Talia from a natural arm perspective. Talia has great athleticism as well, throws a good touchdown the field, but the way that Iowa was just mixing in these zones there, and honestly, it wasn't even crazy scheme-wise. It was just a lot of really good play recognition on the back end by guys like Dane Belton and Kayvon Merriweather and Jack Campbell dropping into an underneath zone and just getting a hand up on a well-timed jump and playing tip drill stuff. I mean, they took advantage of the opportunities that were there and caught the ball when the ball was thrown to them, or at least they had the opportunity to intercept it. And you can't say that about every single team in college football. There's so many drops by defensive backs and linebackers every year. But right now, Iowa is just catching everything that's thrown their way. If you enjoyed this video, then do me a big favor. Head on over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or blackheartgoldpants.com and listen to the All Eyes Podcast. That's right, the All Eyes Podcast. The All Eyes Podcast is a weekly podcast that I personally host alongside a buddy of mine named Thad Nelson, and it's a podcast centered entirely around Iowa football from sort of a deep dive, film review, X's and O's point of view. You know, we have a lot of fun on there. We try to share as much knowledge as we possibly can to make you a more knowledgeable fan. And if you like the video format for this segment of the podcast, make sure to leave a comment, drop a like, and if you're not subscribed and want to help the channel grow a bit, hitting that subscribe button helps the channel out a ton. That said, I will see you all in a future video. Take it easy.